Okay, here we go on part 3, and I'm going to start out here by installing the motors. So let's open the motor up here and see what we got. What do we got in here? We have the nut, and we have 2 different size screws. So let's see what these are here. We have 4mm thick arms and 3mm thick arms. Let's see what we got here. We have 4mm arms. Okay, so we need the screws for the 4mm arms, and we have spare parts. So let's open these up here, and we also need a little Loctite. So let's get some. We got some thunderstorms going on here, and I can't think of a better thing to be doing than building a drone, because I sure can't be out flying on a day like this. So fish the wires down into underneath the heat shrink. That, and start bolting the motors on. A little bit of Loctite. Go. We got a spare screw there. All right. Okay. And tighten up the screws here. I don't think these motors are going anywhere. Okay. Terrific. Scatter screw 2. Make sure that's tight. So there we have the 4 wires, and let's get rid of the flight controller here and see what we got as far as wire length goes. We've got plenty of extra length. Now the decision I need to make right now is, do I want to cut it, or do I want to try to figure out some way to wrap these wires. Plenty of length there on these things. Plenty of length. So they only have to go to right here. So these 3 wires go to these pads, and same thing with the other corners. So if I just put them on there like that, I have way too much slack. So I think the first thing I need to do right now is run out and shrink this heat shrink down, and that'll make things a little bit neater. So I will be right back. Okay, we got the heat shrink shrunk down, and it makes it very, very, very neat. And I know a lot of guys don't use this heat shrink, but I think it's a terrific way to keep these wires neat. And you can, if you have to replace a motor, you can always cut it off. And in fact, if you have to remove the motor, you can always slide another piece of heat shrink on there. So I really don't see any downside to it. Okay, the next step is going to be to solder up the wires on the controller board, and we'll start over here with motor 1. And first thing we need to do is dampen my little sponge. All right. It's very important to have a clean soldering tip. And here we go. We'll start, and I'm going to zoom in here a little closer so you can see what I'm doing. There we go. Let's move it in the center. So we're going to start, and we're going to tin up these leads. And try not to burn anything else up on the board while we're at it. These are big pads, take a lot of heat. Boy, do they take a lot of heat. So there we go. Got all those things. Let's see if I can actually get in even closer to give you an idea of what it looks like. So there's all the pads. Should have nice shiny solder. And it is going to take a little bit of heat. You also want to make sure, and you look very carefully, that you haven't bridged any of the pads between the pads with solder. And I think that looks pretty good. All right, so now we need to decide whether we're going to cut these motor wires to length or just solder them and stuff them in there. And they're already tinned, and the inclination is to just solder them on. But I think I'm going to actually cut them and tin them. So we're going to cut them just a little bit long here. That'd be wire number 1. And this would be wire number wire number 2 right about here. And then we have wire number 3 to about there. I always cut them just a tiny little bit longer. And we'll strip these wires. Let's see if we can do it with this, or I need to get the wire stripper now. Silicone wire is pretty painless to strip with just a side cutter. Just want to pull about 1/8 of an inch of insulation off, and you don't want to cut through the insulation with the side cutter. You just want to squeeze a little bit and pull, let it break off. There we go. And always twist the wires, because all it's going to take is one little strand that you don't see sticking out one side, and to short between the terminals. So there we got three wires, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tin them. Okay, now we got the 3 wires tinned. I'm going to start with the wire on the inside, and these things are going to get hot, so you want to hold them down with the tweezers or something where you can put them in position and hold them there while you solder. And it's probably a good idea to get the other ones out of the way while you're doing this. So the first one is going to go to here. Let's find, there we go, that's a good way of doing it. Now we'll hold the soldering iron with the left hand. And you want to heat the pad up first, because it's a big pad, remember, and make sure everything flows good. There we go. Perfect. There we go. So that is the first set, and let's zoom in on that. You can take a nice close look at it and see what it looks like. And it looks shiny. I don't think they're going anywhere. Go ahead and do the other 3 motors, and then we'll come back. Okay, so now I've got all the motors soldered up, and I'm going to take a little isopropyl alcohol and maybe clean off some of the flux that's on here. So now we've got the ESC all soldered in there, and the only thing left to solder to this board would be the main power connectors, which I'm going to wait on a little bit. So with that done, we can put the controller back on, making sure that the front points to the front. And that is the proper direction. starting to look more like a quad every day. And this will go on here, and I want to put the top plate on and get a battery and adjust the length of this so it works out right. And I think the capacitor here, I don't want it to stick out the side like this. So I think what I'm going to do is put some heat shrink on the legs of the capacitor, and I'm going to mount it off to the side here, probably off to the rear, like this, and have one lead go to the positive and one lead go to the negative. And I think that that would be a very nice way to do it, with heat shrink covering it up so it can't short out on the opposite thing. So we're going to put the capacitor in on the side that way, and we'll do that when we solder on the pigtail for the battery. Okay, I've gone ahead and mounted the camera, and since it's a small camera, what I've had to do is use a little washer, and let me zoom in here so you can see this. I used a little washer on this mount right here. As you can see, right there is the screw, and these little metal supports, I actually had to bend them in just a little bit, squeeze them in a little bit, and I put a plastic washer behind each side and still had plenty of screw to bite into the camera. So that seems to have mounted the camera pretty nicely in there. And then I just ran the wires back, and we'll route them later on. And I think that's a good stopping point for right now, since I have a live stream to do tonight. So that'll take care of part 3 of this, and in part 4 we'll start hooking up the flight controller and install the beeper module and the GPS module and the power pigtail. Plug it all in and see if we have a drone or we have smoke. Okay, that concludes the third part of this, and part 4 we'll see you next time.